Right now, sit on the floor. Cross your legs. Not on a chair, not on a couch. On the floor, legs folded, the way a child sits without thinking about it. Notice what your hips are doing. Notice where the resistance is. If you have spent most of your adult life in chairs, there is a very good chance that what you are feeling is not just tightness. It is a structural change that has been accumulating for years, quietly, without pain, without any signal that anything was happening at all. This video is about what is happening inside your spine right now in this position, and why the discomfort you may be feeling is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you have been doing something wrong for decades. And it has been doing something to you that no ergonomic chair was ever designed to undo. Your spine is not a solid column. It is a stack of 33 bones separated by 23 discs, and each of those discs is an engineering solution to a problem that took evolution hundreds of millions of years to solve. The outer layer of each disc, the annulus fibrosus, is a ring of dense, fibrous tissue, tough enough to contain what is inside it. What is inside it is called the nucleus pulposus. It is 70 to 90% water, depending on your age. It behaves like a pressurized gel. When you load it, it compresses. When you remove the load, it draws fluid back in. It is not passive tissue. It is a hydraulic system. And like every hydraulic system, its function depends entirely on maintaining the right pressure at the right time. Here is the mechanical problem. Your discs have no blood supply. None. There are no vessels running into the nucleus pulposus, delivering oxygen and nutrients the way blood vessels feed a muscle or an organ. Instead, your discs feed themselves through a process called imbibition, the diffusion of fluid and nutrients from surrounding tissues driven by changes in mechanical pressure. When load is applied, fluid is pushed out. When load is removed, fluid is drawn back in, carrying with it the glucose and oxygen the disc cells need to survive. The disc is, in the most literal physical sense, a sponge. It requires compression and decompression cycles to feed itself. Interrupt those cycles, hold it in one position long enough, under one load vector long enough, and the diffusion slows. The disc begins to dehydrate faster than it can recover. It loses height. It loses the hydraulic pressure that keeps the vertebrae separated, and the vertebrae begin to close the gap. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanism behind degenerative disc disease, not age, not genetics primarily. Mechanics. The pattern of load your discs have been absorbing for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Now, the chair. A standard chair places your hips at approximately 90 degrees of flexion. Your knees are below your hips or level with them. Your pelvis is tucked under, what biomechanists call posterior pelvic tilt. And when the pelvis tilts posteriorly, the lumbar spine follows. The natural inward curve of the lower back, lumbar lordosis, the curve that is unique to humans among all primates, the structural adaptation that allows us to carry our torso's center of mass directly over our hips while standing, that curve flattens. Sometimes it reverses entirely, and when it flattens, the pressure distribution across each disc changes. The load that should be distributed evenly across the disc's full surface area concentrates instead on the posterior annulus, the back edge of the disc. The nucleus pulposus, which should sit centered, migrates backward, toward the spinal canal, toward the nerves. Cross-legged floor sitting places the hip joint in external rotation. The femur, the thigh bone, rotates outward relative to the pelvis. This is a range of motion that a chair never asks of the hip joint. The hip capsule, the ligaments surrounding the joint and the deep rotator muscles, the piriformis, the obturator internus, the gemelli, are placed under a gentle, sustained stretch. And the psoas, which is the piece of this story that most people have never heard of, is asked to do something it almost never does in a chair. The psoas major is a muscle that runs from your lumbar vertebrae, L1 through L5, the 5 bones of your lower back, down through the pelvis and attaches to the lesser trochanter of the femur. It is the only muscle in the human body that directly connects the spine to the leg. Its primary function is hip flexion, lifting the leg forward. In a chair, with your hip at 90 degrees, the psoas is held in a shortened position for hours, not contracting, not stretching, just compressed, at a length that requires no work, no extensibility, no engagement. And like any tissue held in a shortened position for long enough, it adapts to that length. It shortens, not acutely, gradually. Over months and years, the resting length of the psoas decreases. And because it connects directly to your lumbar vertebrae, a shortened psoas pulls the lumbar spine forward. It increases the curvature of the lower back beyond its designed range. It compresses the discs at the posterior aspect. It changes your standing posture without your awareness, because the change is so incremental that there is no moment where it crosses the threshold of conscious pain. A 2025 update from the National Geographic, citing Dr. Richard Lau of NYU Grossman School of Medicine, confirmed that after age 30, everyone loses 4 to 6% of their psoas muscle mass per decade, and that rate increases sharply after 60. The muscle is not just shortening, it is atrophying, and modern sitting accelerates both processes simultaneously. Cross-legged floor sitting interrupts this. When you sit cross-legged with your spine upright, not slumped upright, the hip moves into external rotation, and the pelvis is no longer tucked under. The lumbar spine can recover its natural curve. The psoas, rather than being compressed at a shortened length, is placed at a length closer to neutral, not fully stretched, not at its end range, closer to the length at which it was designed to function. And the discs, no longer under the asymmetric posterior loading of a posterior pelvic tilt, begin the process of redistributing pressure across their full surface area. Fluid exchange, imbibition, improves. The hydraulic system begins to function the way it was designed to function. This matters more than it may appear, because your discs do not recover from a single bad day. They recover across cycles. The imbibition process that rehydrates a dehydrated disc is slow. A 2006 study published in the Spine Journal measured disc height in healthy volunteers over a 24-hour cycle and found that lumbar discs increase in height overnight during recumbency. The relief from gravitational loading allows fluid to diffuse back into the nucleus pulposus. During the following day in upright posture, that fluid is slowly lost again. The system depends on adequate decompression to recover from the day's loading. If you compound the loading by spending 8 to 10 hours in a chair, the European Heart Journal confirmed in 2023 that adults sit an average of 10.4 hours per day. The rehydration cycle during sleep may not fully compensate for the dehydration cycle during the day. The deficit accumulates. The disc loses height over years, not overnight. The space between vertebrae narrows. The nerves that exit the spinal canal through the foramina, the gaps between vertebrae, have less room, but the spine is only half of this. The other half is what the floor measures about you. In 2012, Dr. Claudio Gil Araujo of the Clinimex Exercise Medicine Clinic in Rio de Janeiro published a study in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology that followed 2,002 adults between the ages of 51 and 80 for a median of 6.3 years. The test he used was the sitting rising test, the SRT. Subjects were asked to sit down on the floor from standing and then rise again, using as little support as possible. Each hand, knee, forearm, or side of the leg used as support deducted points from a maximum score of 10. Of the 159 people who died during the follow-up period, the distribution across score categories was not random. Those who scored between 0 and 3 had a risk of all-cause mortality 5 to 6 times higher than those who scored 8 to 10. In 2025, the same group published updated reference tables for 6,141 adults, continuing to validate the finding. The ability to sit down and rise from the floor without support predicts survival with a statistical power that rivals standard cardiovascular markers. The test is not measuring fitness. It is measuring the reserve of mobility, balance, and musculoskeletal integration that the body draws on when the unexpected happens. A stumble, a fall, a moment where the body needs to recruit multiple systems simultaneously under novel demand. It measures exactly what a chair does not build and exactly what a floor used daily does. Okinawa is one of the 5 blue zones identified by Dan Buettner, regions where people live measurably longer, with lower rates of chronic disease and higher rates of functional independence at advanced age. In Okinawa, traditional homes have no chairs. Tables are low. People sit on tatami mats, cross-legged, kneeling, shifting between positions, and rise from the floor dozens of times each day, not as exercise, as life. Each descent to the floor and ascent back to standing is a functional squat, a balance challenge, a proprioceptive demand, a brief period of hip external rotation and lumbar decompression, built into the architecture of daily existence. Not scheduled, not intentional. Just the unavoidable consequence of living in an environment that has not yet replaced the floor with a chair. The chair arrived late in human history and spread rapidly. Before it, floor-level living was the default across most of the world. Indian culture uses cross-legged sitting, sukhasana, for meals, prayer, and social gathering. Japanese homes have maintained tatami culture for centuries. The populations with the highest rates of daily floor contact are, without exception, also the populations with the lowest rates of the specific spinal pathologies that correlate with prolonged chair sitting. This is not proof of causation from floor sitting alone. Their diets are different, their stress patterns are different, their social structures are different, but the mechanical load on the spine is measurably different, and the mechanisms connecting that load to disc health and to the mobility that predicts survival are not speculative. They are physics. 10 minutes on the floor does not undo years of chair sitting. That is not what this is about. What 10 minutes does is introduce a demand on the hip joint, the psoas, the deep rotators, and the lumbar spine that the rest of your day does not introduce. It asks the disc to redistribute its load. It asks the psoas to operate at a length it has not been asked to hold. It asks the proprioceptive system to maintain balance without a backrest. And it gives you information, in the form of where you feel resistance, tightness, and discomfort, about what has changed in your body without your knowledge. The people you might know who can sit on the floor comfortably for an hour are not more flexible because they were born that way. They are more flexible because their environment or their habits have continued to demand that range of motion regularly enough that the tissue has not lost it. The people who cannot sit cross-legged without their knees hovering at chest height, without discomfort in the outer hip within 2 minutes, without an overwhelming urge to lean against a wall, they are not inflexible because they aged. They are inflexible because a piece of furniture made that range of motion optional and then irrelevant, and then lost. Your spine was not designed for the chair. The chair was designed for productivity, for formality, for the industrial and office environments of the last few centuries. It is extraordinarily well optimized for sitting upright while working at a table. It is not designed with any regard for what sustained posterior pelvic tilt does to a disc that has no blood supply, or what sustained hip flexion does to a muscle that connects directly to the lumbar vertebrae, or what eliminating floor contact from daily life does to the musculoskeletal reserve that a Brazilian cardiologist found in 2012 predicts whether you will be alive in 6 years. The floor is still there. It has always been there. It does not require a subscription or a prescription. It requires only that you get down onto it, stay there for 10 minutes, and allow your body to do what it was built to do in a position it was built to occupy. Close the chair, pick a spot on the floor, 10 minutes. The spine does the rest.